Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Wednesday, April 2nd, 2025. Time for another show. Time for yet another experiment in the perils of Zoom. We're still working on trying to get the levels here correct and still trying to get the feed correct. And we still haven't. Now we can at least let Greg know when music has started. Whether or not he can hear it afterwards when I begin talking over that music is another question. But the cues are there. That's the important part. And there's important news to cover as well. And as it turns out, a fantastic experiment conducted in the last week or so. As it turns out, there is some question as to whether getting high on designer drugs all the time and playing video games in your office all day and night and tweeting incessantly is a good way to govern or win elections. And we're the data is beginning to pour in about whether or not that will work as a strategy for the guy who has employed it as his chief strategy in life. And I don't know. To date, it's like loaded him up with billions and billions of dollars. So I suppose you could forgive him for misinterpreting the first round of data, but the second round or the new data on whether or not you can govern and win elections on it is beginning to pour in. It is Wednesday, and I'm also beginning to suspect that the Trump administration is beginning to schedule their dumbest and most audacious initiatives. And it's hard to tell which ones those are, but bold new initiatives, as the New York Times would, I'm sure, call them, scheduling them for Wednesdays, particularly when they need to cover up for bad special election results. Today is Trump Trade Tax Day. He's hung a label on it, which it's been very interesting. I saw Oliver Willis noting that he's called it, not Oliver, but Trump calling it Liberation Day, although that doesn't make any sense. But it doesn't matter. It's a moniker. It's a brand for the thing, and everybody is repeating it, even if they're repeating it tongue-in-cheek or I don't know. What is this? This isn't tongue-in-cheek. It's me saying what a dumb name it is, but I need to point out what that name is and why it's ridiculous. But it's an interesting fact, right? The press all went along with it. They would put it in scare quotes. They might even spend some time explaining how it's not liberation at all and nothing is happening in particular, and everything that Trump expects to happen from it is a foolish expectation and won't happen, and he's explaining things upside down and backwards. But they are printing the word liberation over and over again. I don't know how you enforce that except to get people used to the idea that you shouldn't be doing his work for him or carrying water for him. But it's difficult to do and signal to one another that we're talking about the same thing when, I don't know, words and reality don't otherwise mesh very well. All right. So many things happening, many things to catch up on. We're way behind on the fire hose of news, but I think we spent our time well yesterday preparing for today's news. Now we get to catch up on the nitty-gritty facts on the ground, elections and the like. Greg Dworkin is here and ready and making lists, and I have
checking them twice.
Right, and I have some music for you again to introduce you. I've switched it up a little bit.
Ready?
I may go
ready.
Back to it. Okay. How do you like that?
I like it a lot better.
Yeah, I mean, all right, it's a little bit more in keeping with that. And I think I'm going to turn it down a little bit here so we don't run into too much in the way of copyright, but everybody recognizes that, and I think it's more in keeping with the spirit.
If I had a Trump report to do, I think that would be perfect.
Oh yeah, well, there's always...
Otherwise, why don't we try the aristocrats?
There's always the cuckoos. Okay. All right. Okay. So for you, when you come in, we'll have your regular play. We're still experimenting, and we can reserve the other piece for.
I'm going to make a request. I would like "Thus Spake Zarathustra" on the pan flute.
Oh, that's difficult to do.
Perhaps a zither.
All right. Or the what's the I forget the name of that weird electronic instrument where you're just putting things in electronic fields and it goes wee.
Yeah, I like that one.
I forgot the name of that one. Although it came up the other day. in conversation. What a terrible conversation that was.
Right. So,
All right.
yeah, that all sounds good. Or we could do we can go Mozart and do the glass flute, you know,
We got
a,
so
gla
we
a
have
glass
options,
harp or
and there
whatever it's called.
is I think depending on who's performing it, I think we're out of the copyright for. Well, we don't
You
have
have
to pay
to drink
Mozart
just the
for
right
that.
amount of wine, you know, to get the tones right, and put a little
Right.
more in, a little, you know, this may take a while, but I'm okay with that. I love tuning the instruments.
Okay. Well, we're ready to go. The instrumental portion of our show is done. And
Okay, so
what's in the news?
let me point out something you already brought up in the
Yes.
introduction.
All right.
And that is that Trump not only picks Wednesdays to try to blur out Tuesdays because he loses, he does economic stuff at 4:01 p.m. or 4:31 p.m. After the markets close.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't want the markets to crash when he opens his mouth. He doesn't like the idea of Fox News people watching his speech because they have to play it.
Yeah.
And then watching the markets crash in the Chiron. He hates that. So he won't introduce the economy-killing tariffs and his economy-killing plan, his economic plan, until after the markets close today.
Yeah, I mean, he's a very traditional guy when it comes to the markets too, because the
they don't matter
futures
except when they do. So
NASDAQ and then the market futures and then the overseas markets all happily crash on the news of his announcements. They just, but the Dow Jones Industrial something or other.
Yeah.
That one is the one he bases it on.
So because today is Libertarian Day, according to Trump,
yes.
You know, there are a couple of topics I hope to be able to cover today. Let's see if I don't forget them. I want to talk about a discharge petition.
Oh.
And what that means.
All right.
I want to talk about elections, of course. We have to talk about not a filibuster and why it wasn't a filibuster. It was merely a fantastic 25-hour speech.
Yeah, you know, it's okay. You don't have to name it that.
And then, of course, the tariffs.
Yes.
But yeah, let's talk about Cory Booker because I'm tired of Trump getting all the focus. Cory Booker broke a record. He didn't break his ankle. He broke a record.
Yeah.
And the record that he broke happened to be the longest speech given in the Senate by a fellow named Strom Thurmond. Now, I'm old enough to be alive when Strom Thurmond was alive.
Well, I think most of
Didn't he run for like Senate again, like when he was 100 or something? And I don't think I'm exaggerating.
Yeah, I don't think he was quite 100, but he kept it at 100, didn't he?
Yeah.
He was a real one, a real racist.
He was a real one. He was a real racist. Dixiecrat party back in the day.
Yeah.
Which wasn't just a pejorative. It was an actual party.
That's true.
And so Cory Booker felt in his heart that he had to do something about what was going on here. So he and his staff put together not phone book readings or children's book readings like Ted Cruz did, who had one of the longer anti-Affordable Care Act filibusters.
Yeah, and he read Green Eggs and Ham in it.
Yeah, Cory Booker gave a speech, and it was a coherent speech, and it was a coherent speech for 25 hours. Could you play that clip, please? We don't have 25 hours.
Okay.
We have 30 hours.
All right. Well, let me go ahead.
That's how long my Zoom meeting
keep talking. Keep filibustering while I look for the clip.
But technically, it wasn't a filibuster because he was not blocking any specific legislation. He was merely given the floor to speak.
All right. Is it the one? Is it in the? Where's the clip? The one in the roundup?
No, 25 hours.
25. Oh, how come all right.
I want to play 25 hours worth of Cory Booker.
Oh my goodness. All right.
I'm just kidding. We won't.
Oh,
it's
well, good. I
don't have any clips.
Oh.
It was 25 hours, and I looked at it and said, that's a little bit too long for a 20-minute segment.
Okay, I see. All right.
Which takes an hour. But I can't make it 25 hours. It's just.
I thought you might have. All right. Well, there's no highlight for that.
No highlight.
Because
the whole speech was great. The whole speech was coherent. It was really good. And I guess the point I'm trying to make is that he didn't just break Strom Thurmond's time record.
Okay.
Strom Thurmond was filibustering against giving, shall we say, Negroes the right to vote and other things.
Yes, be in the Senate.
So therefore, Cory Booker not only broke Strom Thurmond's record, he also broke Strom Thurmond's legacy. As he said in his speech, I'm here because Strom Thurmond failed.
Yeah.
And so I thought that was just a wonderful point to put on a 25-hour speech.
Yeah, I think that's as good a highlight as you're going to get out of that. It's as good as any, I guess is what I should say. But yeah, that was a big difference in the way he conducted it. He took, he was relieved by other senators from time to time to whom he would yield he didn't yield the floor, but yielding for questions. And, you can do a long rambling question and give a guy a chance to drink a water, but not too much because you can't leave to go to the bathroom.
You can't leave to go to the bathroom.
That's the tough
You
part.
can drink, but you can't eat.
Right.
You can't sit down.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure exactly
arduous.
where on the floor you have to be. There's an old story about Strom Thurmond during his speech, during his filibuster, had 1 foot on the floor and 1 foot in the cloakroom.
Yes.
With a curtain so he could pee into a bucket.
Yeah, they didn't have C-SPAN cameras to worry about back then. And right. And I don't know, back in the day, I guess, a senator peeing into a bucket in the cloakroom wasn't something to get alarmed about. Also, I think
because they were all men,
Yeah, and Strom Thurmond, I think, also was the guy.
So the cloakroom was the men's room, so same thing.
Yeah, essentially, they just pee right into here. And as I recall, Strom Thurmond was the one. I don't know who told this story, but he was the one who people would go down to the house gym and he'd be swimming in the pool, and he was ancient enough that in his day. I guess. I don't know what day that was, but I wasn't born during it. You would go swimming. There were no bathing suits per se. And if you wanted to go swimming and swim laps in the pool, you would take off all your clothes and go do that. And he continued to do that well into the era when women had access to the Senate gym and said, this is disgusting. You should get with the times. How about maybe even just a little Speedo there, Strom? But, well, that'll ruin your day.
Yeah, it will. So, I can understand his resentment about how times change because they weren't the way they were when I was young.
In my day, you'd swim with everything hanging out. All right.
Well, fact is, Cory Booker, just destroyed all of that, and it was a wonderful thing.
Yeah,
so I did want to acknowledge that. Now, since we're talking about Congress, let's talk about discharge petitions.
All right.
So this weird thing happens, which I don't fully understand. I always turn to you when I don't fully understand these process things.
What do you mean? You understand it. You'll be surprised. All right.
Well, Mike Johnson is Speaker. I don't understand. Well,
we don't know why that is.
Why? But he is. Okay. So, it happens that a Republican woman who's a member of the House.
What?
A congressman named Anna Paulina Luna.
Right.
Congresswoman. Has a baby.
Well, all right.
And
congratulations.
In the spirit of republicanism, which is to say it doesn't matter unless it happens to me. She realizes that, having proxy voting when you have a baby to take care of, especially in the first couple of weeks, is a good thing.
Yeah.
So she would like the House to adopt that, and I won't even say break a precedent because there was a precedent. They did a little bit of that during the COVID situation, which Mike Johnson and Republican conservatives have chosen to resent.
Yes.
For reasons which are unclear, probably because Nancy Pelosi is a woman and she happened to be Speaker of the House and they hate that. So in the process of attempting to make sure that women are second-class citizens and shouldn't be considered to have anything close to equal rights with men,
it's an idea.
The conservatives and Mike Johnson are completely opposed to the concept of allowing proxy voting for having babies, because men don't have babies. And if you're in Congress, you're supposed to be working. So what the hell's going on here?
Well,
go home and, take your shoes off and go in the kitchen if you don't like it. So she knows, Anna Paulina Luna, that all of the Democrats will vote for this. Yeah. And probably a good number of Republicans, and therefore it has majority support, and therefore there's no reason not to do this.
Yeah.
And she goes and talks to Johnson, and Johnson says, no way. And Anna Paulina Luna says, all right, I'm going to do something parliamentarian-like called a discharge petition, and I'm going to force a vote.
Yeah.
So to sketch out the bare bones of a discharge petition, it's a way to get around the Speaker when the Speaker doesn't want to use the Rules Committee to get something on the floor.
get around anybody who's got the power to block it from, whether it's the committee chairman sitting on the bill, or the speaker telling him to sit on the bill. Somebody with authority who can make the choices such that a bill gets bottled up in committee and never comes out. You can discharge the committee that the bill's been referred to from responsibility for the bill. Discharge it to where? Onto the floor.
From, for example, the Rules Committee?
You can do the Rules Committee, or sometimes it's the Committee of Jurisdiction that's considering the merits of the bill, if it goes to
the Rules Committee is the important one, because the rule is basically the Speaker's people setting up what's going to come to the floor. In a nutshell, that's why it's called the Speaker's Committee.
Although, that sometimes is the place where things get bottled up, but you don't even really need to involve the Rules Committee in it.
Right, but you do with this,
usually.
And the reason I'm putting it that way is, yes, technically you can bring it to any committee that's bottled up, but the reason the Rules Committee is so important is that Johnson decided that Anna Paulina Luna was out of line, and he wants to block her from blocking him. And therefore, what he did, as far as I understand, is add something through his Speaker's Committee, through the Rules Committee, that any rule, or this rule, or whatever we're going to vote on next rule, and I think he did it on a proposed bill to do something nasty about judges that block Trump and therefore would have a lot of Republican support. What he did is that he added to the rule a provision that says that when we vote in this other measure, this rule says we are also going to vote to block Anna Paulina Luna's discharge petition from happening at any time during this Congress.
Yeah, you can write a rule for anything, I guess.
He did. So he did that. And so then he took the rule to the floor.
Okay.
And 9 Republicans, or 8 enough Republicans voted against it, against the rule. He lost.
That'll learn you.
And he got really angry and said, okay, we're not doing any other votes for the rest of the week.
Right. Well, when you lose a rule vote, you start to lose control of the floor, so you want to adjourn. And they probably didn't have anything else ready to go, so they...
Well, they did. They had a bunch of stuff. They wanted to defund lower courts, or at least make a motion to do so in a performative way. They wanted to impeach judges that blocked Trump. They had an agenda of sticking it to anybody who was blocking the king. And he got really mad because, like, Anna Paulina Luna said, no.
All right.
So Johnson fails to kill bipartisan measure to allow proxy voting for new parents, says the New York Times article. The Speaker tried to use an unprecedented parliamentary maneuver to deny a bipartisan majority the chance to hold a vote on their proposal to allow new parents to vote remotely in Congress. Using strong-arm tactics in a bid to block the measure, Mr. Johnson tried an extraordinary use of the Speaker's power to prevent the House from even considering a measure backed by half its members, but 9 Republicans refused to go along, instead dealing him a public rebuke that left him without a strategy for moving ahead. After the vote, Mr. Johnson abruptly canceled votes for the rest of the week, sending members home and leaving legislative business unsettled. Under House rules, Republican leaders are required to bring the proxy voting resolution to a vote within 2 legislative days, but they appear to be refusing to do anything.
Yeah, well, they love to refuse to obey the rules.
So it was not clear what happens now.
Well, the hurdle of the discharge petition, I guess, remains undefeated. It's very, 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 very rare, and I think there are maybe a handful of situations in which things have actually ever gained a majority of the House's signatures to be discharged. And I hear when they actually came up with one, they still managed to find a way to block it from coming to the floor, but at the expense of all the rest of the Republican agenda for the week and for who knows how long afterwards.
So the current plan, which may or may not fly, is to add this stupid codicil to the rule, to any rule that comes up on the floor until Johnson gets his way.
I guess so.
Which he could do through Rules Committee. That's why I was focusing on that, even though you're right that it could really apply to any committee. But
yes, and it
Rules
does.
Committee is the one that's going to agree to the speaker's demand that you stick this on every single thing you ever do.
That's true. So yeah, there's two reasons though. Yeah, that the Rules Committee is involved. Although the Rules Committee may also have been involved. They may have jurisdiction over the proxy voting measure because it's a rule of the House. So if you wanted to change the
So
rules,
it's theirs
that
anyway. So it belongs with
they were
them.
going to get it. I mean, it could have gone. Sometimes those things will go to the House Administration Committee, but yeah, this could easily have gone. I don't know what it was referred to, but
all rules
has
for
real
any subsequent
business.
legislation is going to go through Rules
they're
Committee.
all going to get there anyway. The reason it's odd to speak about the Rules Committee when it comes to discharge petitions is if you are, if it's a law about anything else and it's been referred to the Energy and Commerce Committee, but the chairman sits on it, if you discharge the bill from Energy and Commerce Committee, it comes with its own default procedure it doesn't have to then go to the Rules Committee and then be discharged from there too. It just comes to the floor with a set standard issue rule for considering the 1 hour rule, 1 hour of debate equally divided, open for amendments, etc. But
right now, here's just another reminder about how Congress
actually, maybe
works.
it's not even open for amendments now that it's a discharge. I don't remember it because it never works. But
yeah, it never works. There's no maternity or paternity leave for lawmakers. They can take time away from office anytime they want. They just can't vote if they're not there.
Right.
So the people who want it changed are basically lawmakers who have had children who want to vote.
Yeah, natalists. Actually, normal people who have, lives.
So this has been an ongoing effort for over a year. Democrats offered expanding the resolution to include new fathers and up to 12 weeks of proxy voting during parental leave. And Mr. Johnson, that would be the vanilla named Speaker of the House.
Yeah.
If right that is his real name. Saddles, Rock Ridge, everybody's named Johnson. Mr. Johnson has adamantly opposed the group at every turn, arguing that proxy voting is unacceptable and unconstitutional, even though the Supreme Court refused to take up a Republican-led lawsuit challenging pandemic-era proxy ruling. So it's already been adjudicated, and he lost. So basically, the only reason for him to do it is to keep his conservatives happy, and the only reason to do that is because they're Neanderthals.
Yeah, it really doesn't make any particular sense. I mean, it was dumb, but I understood enough to when they were opposed it during the pandemic. Well, we oppose the pandemic in general, and we oppose all the safety measures, and we think you're overreacting, and so that's why we're going to oppose any measures you take to keep doing business from a standpoint of safety and distancing. So we're against that. Now, I don't know why they would be against. Yeah.
So here's the rationale now, again, according to the New York Times. Mr. Johnson and his allies have argued that any accommodation allows members to vote without being at the Capitol, no matter how narrow, creates a slippery slope. Oh, you know the slippery slope argument.
I love slippery slopes.
It harms members' collegiality. I do believe it's an existential issue for this body, said Virginia Fox, a North Carolina Republican who chairs the Rules Committee. Congress is defined as the act of coming together and meeting.
Well,
and put simply, members of Congress need to show up for work. You lazy bastards.
Yeah. Well,
what are you doing home with your kid trying to breastfeed them? Get up here. We need your vote to impeach a judge that said Trump can't do something.
Yeah, I mean, at its heart, she's right in that. Okay, well, that's where you're supposed to be. That's what the job is. But people take leaves of absence all the time, whether it's medical or anything. And you just, as long as you write a letter to the speaker that says, I'm going to be undergoing chemotherapy, or I am traveling abroad at this point. Oh, okay.
Or I'm in the hospital.
Yeah. But they do try to, make it so that you have to come and vote in person. And the way they are about their theories about voter fraud. So I guess it's possible they might also think, oh, well, what if someone hacks in and decides to vote?
What if we just do it anyway, like Brian Dworkin did?
Yeah. Okay.
We're not going to pass a rule making it formal. We'll just cheat when we feel like it.
Well, there's also that.
So remember, it's a Republican Party.
Proxy voting. Well,
every accusation is a confession. Yeah. But so this is how the New York Times wrote up what actually happened. Again, it's still a little
Okay.
murky to me, but this
All
is
right.
what they say. On Tuesday morning, Republicans on the House Rules Committee, often referred to as the Speaker's Committee, that's what I call it, because the Speaker uses it to maintain control of the floor, engineered a tricky behind-the-scenes maneuver to kill this effort. They approved a measure that would block the proxy voting bill or any legislation on a similar topic from reaching the floor during the remainder of this Congress. GOP lawmakers inserted it into an unrelated resolution to allow for a vote on the SAVE Act, legislation requiring people to prove their citizenship when they register to vote in a bid to pressure Republicans to support it, and that's what failed on the floor.
Uh-huh.
And that's what upset Johnson.
Well,
you're not allowing us to do our garbage.
Or what?
By introducing something that's actually real.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Well,
we have
it was
garbage
very
bills that we want to pass that aren't going anywhere in the Senate. We know that.
Yeah.
But it's important to be performative because that's all and you're blocking us from doing this.
Yeah. Well, they want, they want this stupid, it's not stupid, but they want the stupid rule about, it's a minor thing, the proxy voting for, how many people are going to be having infant children at any given time? And it's probably going to be pretty evenly divided between Republican women and Democratic women, if you're worried about that. Yeah, I don't know. They just they don't like it, and I understand the slippery slope. But you're the speaker, so how about put some sand on the slope? You could do that.
Yeah, if you feel, it's a pretty mild slope anyway.
Yeah.
So Mr. Johnson, knowing he was losing, leaned on President Trump to help him. Trump called Luna. It didn't work. On Monday, Luna resigned from the House Freedom Caucus. Said their members were unwilling to back her in what she called a modest family-centered proposal.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. So, there are ramifications for the strong arm stuff, especially when it doesn't work.
Yeah. Well, that makes it rough.
Then you expose yourself as, okay, I'm not all powerful, and you can, get around me. You can defy me and live.
Yeah. A direct call from Trump, and you just say no. And it's interesting that I thought she might have drawn her allies from among the Freedom Caucus, even though they're the most Neanderthal-y of
That's
all.
what she thought. And then they said no, and so she said, well, I'm done with you.
Hi, everybody. This is Scott Anderson, your summary guy. Were you looking forward to an egalitarian democracy free of bigotry, misogyny, racism, and greed, where people of different appearances, belief, and heritage had a right to live without fear, and everyone could expect a basic level of health, stability, and safety throughout their life? Well, too bad. The plain fact is that we're heading in the wrong direction. And where we once had a voice in such things, increasingly we don't. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. However, if you're looking to join people who understand today's issues and can intelligently address the reality of today from your point of view, you can join us at Kagro in the morning. As you know, there aren't many of us out there, at least compared to them. We need to stick together, and by that I mean send us money. That is contributions to patreon.com, secure, reoccurring contributions. Those contributions keep this show on the air and us together. We've been through a lot together. The temporary loss of the presidency, we hope. The temporary loss of the House, the Senate, the Supreme Court, we hope. Face it, we are pretty much all that we have left. Remember, we couldn't do it without you, and you shouldn't do it without us. We're in this together, so thanks.
All right, welcome back, everyone, to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. And I have just had revealed to me in secret chat, which I guess is a secret because we're the only ones on it, the names of the 9 Republicans who joined together to block.
I signaled you this top secret information.
That's correct. Zoom. And hello, Putin, Russia, if you're listening, here are the 9 Republicans who broke ranks in order to save this rule allowing proxy voting for new parents that Anna Paulina Luna no doubt thought would be of benefit to the younger cohort of women in the House of Representatives, Republican and Democrat alike. Tim Burchett of Tennessee, who I had no idea was pregnant. Kevin Kiley of California.
It might be recent fathers.
What? I understood this to be about babies, and men don't have roles in that.
Yeah.
Nick LaLotta of New York. Mike Lawler of New York. Anna Paulina Luna, whose idea it was. Ryan McKenzie of Pennsylvania, Max Miller of Ohio, Greg Stubbe, like Captain Stubing, I guess, of Florida, and Jeff Van Drew of New Jersey. Jeff Van Drew, formerly of the Democratic Party and now of the Republican Party of New Jersey, with a clown suit on, no doubt. And so that's 9 Republican defectors, one of them a woman. That's it. No other Republican
women
women
thought not. But again, I don't know if they're recent fathers. It's just interesting that this suggests that in certain areas Mike Johnson really has lost control of the floor.
I guess so. It's always a narrow
prospect. That's why this week's vote was closed down. Not that there's that many days left in the week, but there you have it.
Yeah, that's it. It's interesting that not another Republican woman is on that list, and I wonder whether, I don't know, maybe the whip calls went to all the women. You better not, or I'll break your ankles. And so they didn't, and they forgot to call the men. Oh, well. That's interesting. I also was interested in trying to figure out whether the Freedom Caucus was going to be, like, they're hardcore conservative, etc., but they're also the ones who usually needle the speaker and joust for control. And if she was a member of the Freedom Caucus, I thought she'd bring some of them along with her.
Yeah.
But it turns out they're more reactionary conservative Neanderthal than they are needling the speaker, which I guess is why she got pissed off and resigned, too. Good.
This is a quote that Mike Lawler made on Twitter. Regardless of how one feels about a discharge petition, this is a step that drastically limits the power of individual members and vests it almost entirely in leadership. Furthermore, as the father of 2 young daughters, I fully support Representative Luna's proposed rules change, pro-life, pro-family, allow proxy voting for new parents. It's 2025, and we can easily work out language to safely allow members to represent their districts and vote while raising their new family. And so Johnson said, fine, none of you can come to work.
Okay.
I'm locking the door.
Well, they didn't miss out on anything because they threw everybody out for the rest of the
week. So I thought that was one of the more interesting things that I don't think the news was covering enough.
All right.
This is stuff the news is covering quite well, and good for them.
All right.
Elon Musk proved more of an anvil than a buoy in GOP's massive Wisconsin Supreme Court loss, says the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel.
Okay, they're
right. Comfortable margin, I think it was like 10 points.
Yeah.
Wisconsin voters chose to preserve the state Supreme Court's liberal majority by electing liberal Judge Susan Crawford over conservative Brad Schimmel, who conceded, by the way.
Oh.
Musk made the election his personal project, pouring at least $20 million of his own money.
Yeah,
it doesn't say of his own money, but it was his own money, into boosting Schimmel through ads, events, and even handing out oversized checks and cash to Wisconsin residents. Right. Except they weren't really residents.
I guess they live there. That's it.
But they weren't random people.
Right.
It's like when let's find out this man on the street, and what do you think about this Democratic candidate for your local office? I think he's awful. I think he's a crook. I don't think anybody should. Well, who are you? Well, I'm the Republican local chair.
I'm Mike Johnson.
And I'm here as a random person so that you can interview me in the New York Times as a random person, but not identify me as such. So the people who got the $1 million checks, I think, were like, oh, well, I run the local Republican office, and I'll be happy to be a spokesperson for you. Yeah. They weren't just random people off the street.
No, the one was a story I saw yesterday. One was the head of the college Republicans in Wisconsin.
Oh, what a coincidence.
Yeah. And one was a little more tenuous, but she's a staffer at a company, the chairman of which is like, a $40 million Republican donor and on all sorts of committees and boards.
So they gave it to safe people.
Yeah. Right. And maybe even people who could be counted on to kick some of it back if necessary.
Yeah, because they're all corrupt. I mean, it's just like goes with the territory.
Yeah.
More than $100 million was spent on this race less than 10 years ago. It cost $4 million to run a race like this.
Yeah,
of course, the stakes were much lower than says the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel. By a double-digit margin, Wisconsin voters chose to preserve the state Supreme Court's liberal majority for another 3 years. The election loss to some Republicans was tech billionaire Elon Musk's. The opulence of the Musk operation was more than Republican voters and maybe some MAGA voters could take, said Brandon Schultz, former Republican strategist and executive director of the state GOP. Musk made the election his personal project. He lost. He even wore a cheese head. He looked like a jerk. He is a jerk. There was the
Yeah, I just
gamble
saw
by
that
Musk
picture.
to get as engaged in this race. Believe me, he could help to engage and inspire Trump voters. Amy Walter of the Cook Political Report said. It's also an indication, which I think we're seeing anecdotally and sporadically in other places. Democrats are much more engaged and energized at this moment in time. So there was a big turnout, a really big turnout in Wisconsin. This wasn't a low turnout election, which Susan Crawford, the Democrat, would have been guaranteed to win. In fact, what happened is that uh, Musk and Trump motivated Democrats. They also motivated
Sure.
Republicans. They motivated them to turn out. So the WOW counties, Waukesha and Ozaukee and Washington, had big percentage gains over the Janet Protasiewicz vote a couple of years ago,
Okay. Seems like a
2023, I
couple
think
of
it
years
was.
ago. Anyway.
And the fact that the percentage went up so high in a place like Washington is good for Republicans, as we saw all of the Twitter trolls tell us in the run up to the election. It's just that adding 7,000 votes in a small county doesn't match adding 50,000 votes in a big county.
That's the way it is with 7 and
Dane
50.
and Madison and Milwaukee County turned out to be more important. And so the Susan
Janet
Crawford,
wins too.
the Democrat, won easily. It wasn't close.
Yeah, like 55-45 or something in that neighborhood.
Yeah, and in fact, in every Republican county that the Republican won, he did 4 or 5 points worse than Trump did.
Uh-huh.
So basically,
that's the anvil.
the Republicans didn't show up the way they did. And that's the thing. Trump has put together a coalition, and Republicans have put together a coalition that will show up with bizarre, odd Joe Rogan voters on election year and can't be bothered in a non-presidential election.
They have comfortable chairs, headphones. It's difficult to get them to move. The Joe Rogan
and there's no
audience
proxy
likes
voting,
like
you
it's
know.
comfort.
So
right, true. I guess that's something they could have thought of. But all right, the Republicans, by the way, they did get pretty comfortable with proxy voting during the COVID pandemic, the height of the pandemic. I know we get objections. No, it's still there, so don't say it's over. But yeah, all the precautions are over. That part we know. But they protested it. They said it was unconstitutional, but they took great advantage of it all the time. As long as it's on the books, we'll use it.
So I think Amy Walter had the best summary, and this, applies to the 2 Florida wins for Republicans, replacing Matt Gaetz and Mike Waltz. Republicans won those, but at half the margin in those 2 districts, Florida 1 and Florida 6, that Trump got. And Amy Walter said in the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, the risk of nationalizing this race in Wisconsin rather, was always there for Republicans. But then to nationalize it around Musk versus Trump, I always thought that was a very sort of curious choice.
Yeah, and I guess it was Elon's choice. He just said, I'm going to go
President
do
Musk
this.
decided that's what he wanted to do.
Yeah.
The polling suggested he wasn't going to be able to turn out those Trump Republicans. So it's sort of fascinating to me, said Amy Walter, that Musk became the face of this election. And Crawford and state Democrats, in fact, because Ben Wickler knows what he's doing, the state Democratic chair, focused the attacks on Musk. At one point during the race's only debate, Crawford called her opponent Elon Schimmel.
It's clever. I mean, I guess it's not.
People
I wouldn't say it's clever. I just say
it's very clever.
Why not try it?
It worked. It stuck.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Musk in the final weeks of the race had virtual rallies and an in-person event in Green Bay to hand out $1 million check, growing his physical presence. Trump endorsed Schimmel and held a tele-rally, but didn't hold an in-person event.
Yeah, lazy.
And Musk's intervention probably backfired. They really screwed this up.
Yeah. Now they may have lost anyway, and it may have. I guess the only way you can make this look like, okay, Trump understands the situation. I don't think he does. But if you were to say, well, he knows that if he showed up and did the rally. It would be a big waste of time. There's going to be a big reaction, a swing back against him, a backlash. So if Trump wants to go golfing and Elon feels like doing the campaign work, fine, go ahead and do it. And plus, he's going to pay and give out money and spend it all. Go ahead and do that. But it's not clear that this was going to be a loss regardless. I mean, there's lots of reason to believe in a backlash, but yeah, apparently now it's quantifiable.
You made it
5
a
points.
bigger loss. And let me go into this a little bit more. This is from the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel. This is Barry Burden, political science professor at University of Wisconsin-Madison. Oh, Madison must have been one of those types. Can't trust anyone.
One of those communists.
You can, because like he knows what he's doing.
Okay.
It really provided fuel for Crawford's campaign, and it looks like Elon Musk's intervention probably backfired. It was a kind of focal point for people who were upset by what's happening in Washington. Remember, this is a local view. I'm going to go national with it in a minute.
All right.
He could have intervened in a more subtle way that didn't put him in front. He could have sent money in to help Schimmel in the state without making himself the center of attention, but he did some outlandish things, and that was sort of a gift to the Democrats. And Democrats characterized Crawford's win as defeating a billionaire, always popular. That's populist. Instead of the conservative judge on the ballot, or even the Republican president Schimmel put at the center of his campaign. And in many ways, the race felt more like presidential stakes than a spring off-year election. Planes crisscrossed southern Wisconsin skies, advertising the candidates. That's where people live. That's why they were there.
Yeah.
And so tons and tons of advertising. With Crawford's win, the liberal majority of the state's highest court will remain in place until 2028. Had Schimmel won, partisan control of the court would be in play again in 2026, when conservative Justice Rebecca Bradley's up for a second 10-year term. She might be unelected. That'd be nice.
Mm-hmm.
The court could take up a lawsuit over the state's congressional districts. So two of the House Republicans said you have to vote for the Republican or they're going to get rid of our districts. That would be nice.
No.
So, to Wisconsin, it was an intensely important local election that they lost. But from a national perspective, let me speculate. This isn't written anywhere. This is me.
You have to.
What if Elon Musk is obnoxious and every Republican happens to hate him?
That would
every
be
Republican office member or office holder who has to deal with him hates him.
Yeah.
And even if you're like total MAGA and you think,
Trump
is anointed, the idea that Musk is stepping on his territory is not necessarily loved. So my point is that when Musk appears unstoppable and has all this money, you keep your mouth shut. When Musk shows up in Wisconsin and makes himself the anvil and loses and everybody blames him, there's your opening.
Yeah.
As a Republican office holder to say, I never liked this guy.
Right.
And whether you do it publicly or privately, breaking with him now becomes just that much easier.
Yeah. I guess now go back to the tally sheet and look at all the Republicans who held town hall meetings where Republicans showed up to protest. And really all they were saying was just break with Musk. Just tell us that you think that this whole dodgy Musk thing is stupid. Yeah. Oh, no. Now they're going to be saying, you have a point. I love Trump, but I don't know about this Musk
I'm just listening to my
guy.
voters, I'm just going where the voters are.
So that opportunity now exists, and it's good. I'm happy with that. And my question about Elon Musk is, like, I know what Trump... I guess I know how Trump should be predicted coming out of something like this. This is all wrong. Nobody hates me. It's just a weird anomalous result. Elon Musk.
That's another aspect to this.
What is that?
Trump does everything he wants. Oh, really? They blame me when they should be blaming him. We can't have that. Let's start blaming Elon.
Yeah. Oh, that's true. Right. And I guess I don't know when they actually do this thing, but he'll have a day or two to blame everything on Mike Waltz too, when and if he finally comes around to firing him.
Fault.
But yeah, I'm curious is Elon capable of saying to himself, well, that sucked. I guess it's just not really working. Well, why should I bang my head against the wall and burn $20 million next time? I won't. Or what does he say? No. I think if I do it in a Speedo, it'll work, and I'll try it again.
Well, because if he doesn't spend the money, why should any Republican fear him?
That's true too. We can spend the money, or maybe he says, "I'll spend the money, but I won't be the face of it."
I'll do it on your primary. Yeah, you think that I did a bad thing, and you're telling me that I made a mistake. I think the next time I spend $20 million, it won't be on a Wisconsin judge. It'll be on your primary, Jeff Andrew.
That's certainly something he can do and threaten people with. I'm curious to see how open he is.
But now they can turn around and say, big deal. The money doesn't matter. I'll just run against you.
That's the counterbalance. There's moves and counter moves, certainly.
Right, exactly.
I am curious to see whether Musk's mind is open to the possibility that, well, my money is my leverage, but maybe I just shouldn't be the one holding rallies and wearing cheese heads.
Well, that implies some sort of self-awareness.
Right, and I'm not certain if he's got it. Trump does not, but I don't know. I guess we were supposed to think that Elon did because, I don't know, rockets? No one knows what the magic formula is.
You guys are making up this billionaires with big ego thing. It's not real.
I guess not.
Really?
Yeah.
Now we got
so we'll see. I have a hard time believing that he is willing to believe that he was the problem. And I assume, like Trump, he'll find something else to blame. And he certainly won't turn off the money spigot. He knows that's his only leverage. The question is whether he thinks this was an anomaly or something he can fix by, wearing something different or giving bigger checks out. I don't know what.
You know who should be interviewed about this? It's the guy you don't hear of anymore that you used to hear about all the time.
Who's that?
That My Pillow guy who supposedly had a lot of money once.
Oh, yeah, he's lost quite a bit of it.
Well, why don't you ask him about what he thinks Elon is?
I don't even remember his real name. Pillow guy.
I don't know. All I know is he looks like Larry Sabato.
It's out there. Good. I'm happy. I'm having a difficult time recalling
Mike
his name.
Something. Who knows?
Yes. And when it comes, and someone will type it in, and it'll flash up on the screen, and it'll say, yeah, right, of course. But
yeah, that guy that I don't remember. I just read his name and I still don't remember.
Yeah, like the name of that weird instrument, which Justice reminded me was a theremin, which sounds like a
I still
pharmaceutical.
Think we should do glass harmonica from. Anyway,
yeah.
Yet another different. Just give you an idea of what kind of bad week Trump is having. This is in the New York Times. Some conservative voices raise alarm over Trump's immigration tactics. The cracks in support show how seriously some conservatives are taking the administration's aggressive and at times slapdash tactics. We talked about Dave Portnoy last week. This week it's Joe Rogan. You're going to get scared that people who are not criminals are getting lasted up and deported and sent to El Salvador prisons, Mr. Rogan said on the show. He added the case was horrific.
He did.
And Coulter didn't like what happened with the Columbia student.
What?
The dissenting voices, who have been limited mostly to commentators rather than elected Republicans, are remarkable because conservatives don't often openly break with the president. And while the objections have largely been contained to tactics, like what they're actually doing, the cracks show how seriously some conservatives are taking the administration's aggressive and slapdash methods.
Yeah, slapdash. Yeah. I like slapping. That part is good.
Like the latest where they sent the Maryland man to El Salvador because of an administrative error, but now says it lacks the ability to have him released. Well, he's in a prison in a foreign country. What do you want from us?
Yeah, right. How did he get there? We don't know. By the way, Justice suggests that the guy's name is Mike Pillow, which is a good name for him. And it
rocks sort of company.
Yeah, I mean it sounds like the company, and it's in the Tim Apple theme as well. But it's Mike Lindell. I had to look it up. And then as I'm thinking, Mike, and it's with an L. Mike Lawler. No, he's the guy. He's the Congress guy. I'm so happy to have almost forgotten his name. Huh. But that's all right. What were we saying? The other thing.
Well, we're saying that conservatives are noticing that some of the stuff he's doing can't go along with. Right, now that goes along with this very frustrating story. It's always frustrating when you read these. This one's in the Washington Post. Trump
That's
voters
frustrating. Yeah.
in the federal government are torn over his job cuts. Basically, the survey says,
survey
if you
says.
ask federal workers in Alabama, Utah, and other places like that, Idaho, very conservative areas are going to attract federal workers in those states because each state has federal offices.
Yes. It's the
And
way
they're
the federal
going to
government
attract
works.
conservative workers from the community. And therefore, it's not surprising that those conservative workers who work for the government
Yes.
voted for Trump in
Yes.
Utah, in
No,
Idaho,
sorry they
in
did, but-
Alabama. Not surprising at all.
Right.
Okay. But what do they think now? Well, here's a
Yeah.
guy, Capsopoulos, Robert Capsopoulos, who happened to be in Huntsville, Alabama. He supports Trump's mission to shrink the federal government, but he wants to see his financial situation improve, like it did last time Trump was in office. Because I don't remember the pandemic, and I don't remember all of this stuff starting under Trump. I remember it starting under Biden because I only watch Fox News.
Sure.
I'm kind of all for the cuts, but I think he's a totally different person than the first time. I'm not seeing it in my wallet. Nonetheless, I still would vote for him, all that sort of stuff. Interesting that there was somebody else that they interviewed that basically said, and this to me is the part I found interesting, somebody who lived in Idaho, Treasury Department, voted for Trump in the fall because he liked his business background and felt the economy under Biden and Harris wasn't good enough. Inflation surged to a 40-year high during Biden's presidency, which experts attribute largely to the pandemic. My complaint about Biden is he should have blamed Trump for it, but he didn't. But the employees started to grow nervous about his choice on Trump's first day back in office.
Really?
When the president blasted out too many executive orders for him to keep track. I was like, no, this isn't what we wanted, said the employee, who, like others, spoke on the condition of anonymity for fear of retaliation. We want change, but we don't want you to go in like a bulldozers.
Yeah.
And then talks about how he got really upset when people around him are fired. But this is the part I found interesting. The employee said he wouldn't vote for Trump again.
That is interesting.
He's not sorry he didn't vote for Harris because, quote, it would have been more of the same of what Biden was doing at the time, and it wasn't working, so it needed to be changed, end quote. And I think that encapsulates why Harris lost. She was in a bind because she couldn't completely break with Biden because that would upset the Democrats. But she couldn't embrace him because that upset people like this.
Yeah.
Harris voters, not necessarily a Democrat, who really wanted something different because they were not happy where Biden was, and Biden wasn't doing enough acknowledging that there was a problem.
Yeah. Well, that's a perennial
Alabama guy
for
said,
VP.
I totally stand by my vote. I just want to give Trump more time to see how it trickles down. I don't like Musk, but I just like Trump, and I just, he's a businessman.
He's not.
He was bankrupt. He lied. He's a convicted felon. That part of
businessman.
Being a businessman. What about that? Well, no, it's and so I wrote on Twitter this morning, bit of a rant. I said it's a great morning after a good and necessary election correction. So steel up for some frustrating reads. The Trump support is cracking but not gone in the federal government, in the Washington Post, and the New York Times saying conservative voices don't like what he's doing on immigration. And I wrote, why just cracks? Because they won't or wouldn't vote for a Democrat. And they still hope it won't affect them personally in the end. I don't like what I'm seeing, but it won't affect me is not a stable situation, especially when it comes with the economy. We'll find that out tonight.
Yes. And in the fact that it could eventually affect you. And then what are you going to do?
Trump voters voted for an illusion. They voted for the mirage of the first Trump term because they forgot the pandemic. They forgot his bankruptcies. They forgot his lies. They didn't pay attention to his convictions.
Right.
But realization only comes with time and after pain, and that's your pain. You don't care about others' pain, or you do, but you don't think it's important. And that's what we've become as a country, and it's not pretty.
Yeah. Well, it's been interesting watching conservative voices object to things that have been traditional conservative objections, but have been shelved of late, right? Like
Right.
I think about all the people who have for decades been stockpiling weapons against the belief that eventually the federal government would become tyrannical and chuck, habeas corpus rights under the bus for political expediency. And then of course that happened, and it hasn't happened to me. So I guess I'll be clinging to my guns and voting Republican until it happens to me. And then if it does happen to me, then there's probably a good reason for it, and I'll give my guns to someone else. And I don't know. But yeah, it was interesting to watch Joe Rogan, and it's also a good point just in terms of we keep reiterating it's frustrating and it's hard to believe that anybody just wouldn't be paying attention or would just be consuming the wrong type, I guess, of news, that's aimed at keeping them in the dark, and then light shines through and Rogan finds out that they're just sweeping people up off the street and shipping them to El Salvador with no rights and no possibility of correcting it. What? That's insane. Yeah. Even Ann Coulter. What? You can't do that. Yeah, but they are. And what are you going to do about it? Well, nothing. But the point is, it's crazy. At least, I don't know. At least that's happening.
Well,
but
let me just ask you a question.
no.
That's your answer?
No,
Is that your final
I'm not
answer?
going to let you ask. Go ahead.
Yeah.
I will.
Let me
I
ask this
grant
in
you
form
this
of a-
question.
This is Kagro
Make sure it's in the
Morning
form of a
Jeopardy,
question. Yes, right?
right? So, would you mind having a true MS-13 vicious killer gang member deported?
Would I mind
If
having
they actually really were an MS-13 serial killer?
adjudicated, like brought to court?
I mean,
no.
like really happened. Adjudicated or not? I mean, the guy actually
that
belongs to the
matters.
gang and actually kills people.
It would
you
be
mind seeing that guy deported?
less troublesome but you have to show me that
You have to
that's
go
what
through due
happened.
process, but let's say you go through due process. Would you like to see him deported?
Okay. I think most people would agree, yes. And
Well, there you have it.
Yeah, right.
That's why every single person who responds to this says, well, I appreciate what he's
Right.
doing. I just don't like the way he did it.
Right.
And that's what due process means.
Yeah, well, that's how you know you're doing the thing you said. Would you like it if I
Now-
deported a felon? Yes,
Would
but
you
how do
like
you know
if
he's a
I
felon?
deported a felon? And by the way, I also have a history of lying and proven in court.
Right.
I
That's a
lie
problem.
about everything.
Hmm.
Would you trust me?
No.
No.
I would not. Yes, that's exactly right. And that's all it takes to annoy some of these, I guess. I don't even know if I can even
That
call
annoys the
Rogan a
conservatives. But
principled
what about
conservative.
the block of voters that voted for him? What is it going to take for you to understand what's going on here?
Yeah. Well, that's reflected in the polling that we see, where people say I'm for an immigration crackdown, but I insist on due process. They're upset when that doesn't happen.
Yeah, Marie Le Pen got due process.
All right, welcome back, everyone, to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Still fiddling with settings. Today, after discussing the situation prior to the show with Greg, I thought that maybe I'd managed to engineer it such that at least we could get the music across the wires, per se. Which are not wires, in fact, per se, but made it so that Greg could hear the cues of the music. But still, we had, I guess the issue was, as he described it, and I don't think it makes any difference to the people listening to the stream, although I have had a couple of reports that say, yeah, if you're listening to the live stream, the music is very loud, and then it's kind of difficult to hear you, or almost impossible to hear you over the stream. I don't know whether anybody can hear Greg speaking over the music, but then on Greg's end, when music is playing in the background, now he can hear it playing so long as I don't say anything and he doesn't say anything. But when I speak, I'm drowned out in his ears by the music, and in his ears, when he speaks, the music cuts out, and that's clearly noise canceling going on. And I wonder whether maybe we have to, I changed some settings on my end, but maybe we need to have Greg fiddle with the settings on his end as well. What are we using again? Zoom claims to have on offer a setting known as how do they label it? I'll go and take a look at it while we're doing it, because we'll make the show about that. Why not? In their audio settings, they claim to offer a setting called live performance audio, though they say it's in beta, which I guess is code for it doesn't work. It's supposed to be. We have it working here, but we're still working out some bugs. Every time I click live performance audio, which it says parenthetically is recommended for multiple instruments or voices in different locations, which I thought meant might, interfere less with offer less in the way of noise canceling and just play the damn music for everybody. But when I click it on and tell it to go, the little radio button on it comes up and says, all right, you've engaged live performance audio. But on the Zoom call screen, it says, by the way, live performance audio is off. It's not available. It's in beta, you dummy, that it's not real. Okay. So, all right, well, that setting could be the one, once it's, I guess, out of beta, could be the one that we want. But since it's not available, should I try one of the other ones? And let's see, we had been using low settings. Zoom background noise removal allows for different settings. Auto, which I bet doesn't do us any good. High, which sounds like it will make the problem worse. When we used to do it on Skype, I had it set on the equivalent of low, which allows for filtering out of faint background sounds. Then I also tried in the later part of today's program with Greg, I tried what they label original sound for musicians, which I thought, all right, I don't know. That's not really what we're doing, but we are using music, so maybe that's it, even though it says that's what's recommended for studio environments. And we don't really actually have a studio environment going on here in terms of good noise muffling from everything else and sound isolation. But I thought I'd try it as the next best available alternative to live performance audio. Anyway, it didn't seem to do the trick, but I wondered whether maybe if we were both setting it to, if not live performance audio, maybe that's it. The reason it's not available is the other person on the call isn't using it. I don't know. We'll have to experiment. And it may just be that, what can I tell you? It just never really works out all that well. Well, all right. I guess I don't know. For now, I'll leave it set to original sound for musicians, whatever that means, and see if maybe Greg setting his settings to original sound for musicians makes it any different. Audio engineers, give it some thought. Anyway, onward. Probably back to, our country, politics, the courts, everything that's going on there. So many things to share with you, and we're falling further and further behind. But what can I tell you? Let's see. New news on Signalgate front, I guess, just to keep that in your consciousness. And, we never really should forget about that. And remember, nobody's paid a price at all for this. And although they're moving closer and closer to throwing Waltz under the bus, the bus is just sitting there idling, wasting gas, or maybe it's an electric bus, and it hasn't run over Waltz's body yet. So we're waiting. I think Trump thinks that if he just lets people get bored with it, maybe he won't even have to fire Waltz. But they're working hard. They're working overtime in the bowels of the White House. And when Trump is in the White House, there's a lot of bowels, is what I think is what's happening here. But they're working overtime to make sure that Waltz is the one that takes the fall for this for reasons. I'm not sure what those reasons are. Maybe it's they burnt too much political capital trying to get Hegseth through, and they're reluctant to let go of him. But I think the upshot of this is stories like this are making it to the Washington Post. Waltz and staff used Gmail for government communications, officials say. That, too, would be a big no-no under all the protocols. And remember that this is supposedly Waltz, do you remember what his job is? National Security Advisor, right? So Mr. National Security, supposed to be, doing his utmost, taking all sorts of extraordinary measures to make sure that his communications are secure in all instances. And he's just not doing it. And, I don't know what kind of training he got I'm sure this wasn't part of the training because it didn't exist when he was a Green Beret. But remember, that's supposed to be his big claim to national security fame. And I don't know. He should know at least how to cosplay as an operator here, right? He should be overdoing it. Make sure that everything is super secure. I want all the coolest secure communications equipment traveling with me wherever I go so that although it is inconvenient to remember to use that stuff, consider it cosplay. But he won't even do that. So what's going on? Again, Washington Post, Waltz and staff use Gmail for government communications, officials say. Subheader reads, Trump's national security advisor is trying to manage his way out of a crisis, i.e. survive this crisis. But new revelations about his team's operational security are piling up in the inbox. Wink, wink. In the inbox. Also piling up in my inbox, that crazy bluebird, which I don't know, depending on whether or not the sound settings make it easier for you to hear that as background noise. I don't know. Unless he's tapping out very, very slow Morse code. I don't know what's going on. All right, who wrote this piece in the Washington Post? John Hudson did. That's who. Written yesterday, updated anyway, yesterday last at 7:05 p.m., so it's still a developing situation. Members of President Donald Trump's National Security Council, including White House National Security Advisor Michael Waltz, have conducted government business over personal Gmail accounts, according to documents reviewed by the Washington Post and interviews with 3 U.S. officials. And, of course, we're waiting for Hillary Clinton once again to say, are you effing kidding me? I thought this was, I know she no longer believes that this was a serious issue in 2016. She may never have believed that this was a serious issue in 2016, and it's hard to blame her, given what's going on. The use of Gmail, a far less secure method of communication than even that stupid encrypted messaging app Signal, which they effed up when they tried to use it, is the latest example of questionable data security practices by top national security officials already under fire for the mistaken inclusion of a journalist in a group chat about high-level planning for military operations in Yemen. And then the denial that that's what they were doing, of course. A senior Waltz aide used the commercial email service for highly technical conversations with colleagues at other government agencies involving sensitive military positions and powerful weapon systems relating to an ongoing conflict, according to emails reviewed by the Post. While the NSC official used his Gmail account, his interagency colleagues used government-issued accounts, as they're supposed to do, I would note. Headers from the email correspondence show. So everybody else was obeying the rules, even as annoying as they are, but just not the national security guys. Wow, that seems wrong. Waltz has had less sensitive but potentially exploitable information sent to his Gmail, such as his schedule and other work documents, said officials, who, like others, spoke on condition of anonymity to describe what they viewed as problematic handling of information. The official said Waltz would sometimes copy and paste from his schedule into Signal to coordinate meetings and discussions. So a little bit of out of the frying pan and into the fire. Although Signal is by itself, if you actually direct the communications correctly, could be considered, and I guess is considered, more secure than Gmail. But, he's tempting fate every time he uses Signal because he's already effed it up once. And I guess that's meant to illustrate a not particularly secure method of communication, to take your schedule and just simply cut and paste it into places that aren't, that aren't government level secure. Or what could they do with that? Well, foreign intelligence services can extract lots of interesting information from mundane stuff. Anyway, the use of personal email, this piece continues, even for unclassified materials, is risky given the premium value that foreign intelligence services place on the communications and schedules of senior government officials, such as the National Security Advisor, experts say. There's all sorts of things you can glean from the margins, right, of any communications. NSC spokesman Brian Hughes said that he has seen no evidence of Waltz using his personal email as described, and said on occasions when legacy contacts, quote-unquote legacy contacts, have emailed him work-related materials, he makes sure to CC his government email to ensure compliance with federal records laws that require officials to archive official correspondence. So that's only one aspect of why it's problematic for him to be communicating over private, non-governmental channels. But he seems to be solving that one by CCing the official email so that there will be a record. Okay, sure. But now you're just saying there's a record of confidential information that the Iranians have stolen. Well, you made a record. We know what they stole, and we'll be able to discuss it in decades to come. But the problem is, could you also not have that information being monitored and stolen by hostile foreign governments? Oh, that? No. But I will make a copy of it for the record. But anyway, conflating the two issues so that he can go out and say, Waltz didn't and wouldn't send classified information on an open account, said Hughes, except when he does. When asked about a Waltz staffer discussing sensitive military matters over Gmail, Hughes said NSC staff have guidance about using only secure platforms for classified information. But that's not an answer because we're asking you about the time that they didn't follow the guidance. What about that? Well, they have guidance. So why didn't they follow it? This press conference is over. Waltz has also created and hosted other Signal chats with cabinet members on sensitive topics, including on Somalia and Russia's war in Ukraine, said a senior administration official. So there's the Houthis small group chat, and there's also a Ukraine small or possibly large group chat, Somalia group chat. You see? All right. So we now know this is happening over and over again. We just have to cross our fingers and hope that there aren't any people accidentally included in those chats. But we won't know because he's keeping those chats secret. The existence of those groups was first reported by the Wall Street Journal on Sunday. Hughes said that Signal is approved and in some cases is added automatically to government devices, but that appears to be in dispute as well. He acknowledged that it is not supposed to be used for classified material and insisted Waltz never used it as such, but he did. Waltz's creation of a Signal group chat that discussed sensitive information and included Jeffrey Goldberg, the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic, and a prominent critic of President Donald Trump, has rankled the president and frustrated other cabinet members whose communications were exposed on the chat. So now he's rankled, and he needs to steam his pants now that they're rankled or wrinkled, depending, and Hope Hicks is not there to do it. Publicly, Trump has strongly, very strongly backed Waltz, but on Wednesday he met with Vice President J.D. Vance, Chief of Staff Susie Wiles, and others to discuss whether to keep him on. A day later, he informed aides that he was not firing Waltz, but it was largely out of a desire to avoid giving the, quote, liberal media a scalp, said a senior administration official. So he's more concerned with them getting a scalp than with his national security advisor actually securing communications. Well, if I admit that he was wrong, they get a scalp. But on the other hand, if they get the scalp, you've eliminated a giant leak in your national security information atmosphere. But who cares? Oh, well, there is that. This incident badly damaged Waltz, said this one senior administration official, who noted that the National Security Advisor was told after the meeting that he needed to be more deferential to Wiles. I'm sure she would love that. The Wednesday meeting was first reported by the New York Times. Data security experts have expressed alarm that U.S. national security professionals are not more readily using the government's suite of secure encrypted systems for work communications, such as, I don't know, how do you think they pronounce this when they say it out loud? It's JWICS, which stands for the Joint Worldwide Intelligence Communication System. And that's known to be a bit clunky and difficult to use. I think that was the original reason that Hillary Clinton didn't use it for all of her communications, because it was difficult, clunky, and maybe not even particularly reliable or fast, not fast enough to get, real-time responses. I don't know. Anyway, but of course, Republicans ran on, oh no, it's super important to do it that way. And then they found, you know what, I don't really actually like this. Anyway, JWICS, what do you think that is? Jewix? It sounds a little too close to Jewish. I don't know whether they're comfortable. I'm not comfortable with that one. I don't know. JWix maybe would be how they say it. Most concerning, however, is the use of personal email, which is widely acknowledged to be susceptible to hacking, spear phishing, and other types of digital compromise. Unless you're using GPG, email is not end-to-end encrypted, and the contents of a message can be intercepted and read at many points, including on Google's email servers, said Eva Galperin, Director of Cybersecurity at the Electronic Frontier Foundation. National security experts have expressed alarm over the administration's denial that the leaked Signal chat contained classified information. Like it clearly did. Why are they denying it? Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's comments in the Signal chat detailed the sequencing, timing, and weapons systems in advance of the Trump administration's March attack on Houthi militants in Yemen, potentially jeopardizing U.S. airmen heading into harm's way. And that's another place where even Joe Rogan has said, well, I think I know what classified information means, and that looks like it's pretty clearly classified stuff. Why don't they just admit it? Why don't they get the guy back from El Salvador? Why can't they fix any of their mistakes? That's beginning to bother people. In the chat, Waltz offered, of course, a brief but highly specific after-action report of the strikes, revealing that the military had positive ID of a senior Houthi leader walking into his girlfriend's building, pointing to what intelligence sources would later confirm was Israeli surveillance capabilities shared with the United States. Oh, that I'm sure helped lots. Israeli officials expressed frustration that their capabilities were made public. Yeah, although you probably guessed, probably the Israelis are surveilling these guys. Why? Why are we attacking them? We're attacking them because they are attacking shipping, yes, but also launching missiles all the way into Israel. And so the Israelis are likely keeping an eye on them. We probably should have guessed that, but this confirms it. You're supposed to remember we neither confirm nor deny that part of the equation so that there's some guessing going on. But this undid all of that. Anyway, U.S. officials say Trump is much more upset about the inclusion of a liberal journalist on a confidential group chat than he is about exposing secrets to foreign adversaries, because he does that all the time. But White House officials have found Waltz's denials increasingly hard to believe. Waltz, who added Goldberg to the chat, told Fox News, "I take full responsibility. I built the group." But he has subsequently said Goldberg's contact information was, quote, sucked into his phone somehow, and he's never met or talked to the journalist despite a newly circulated photo of the two men near each other at an event at the French ambassador's residence in Washington. It's not conclusive, but it's something. He's telling everyone that he's never met me or spoken to me. That's simply not true, Goldberg told Meet the Press on Sunday. And that's that's better information than the picture of them near one another. You could be near one another and not meet, but ask Goldberg, and he's got no reason to lie. Yeah, I met him. What can I tell you? We have. This isn't the Matrix. Phone numbers don't just get sucked into other phones, he added. I know, and that's a pretty dumb and not particularly tech-savvy answer. Waltz, the Green Beret, the first Green Beret, in fact, elected to Congress and an advisor to former Vice President Dick Cheney, who is now on the outs, I guess, has long pontificated about the importance of classified information and harshly criticized the Justice Department for not pursuing charges against Hillary Clinton for using a private email server as Secretary of State. And to be more precise about it, I think it would have been fair to say, here in the Washington Post, that Waltz how long has he pontificated about the importance of classified information? As long as it's been known that Hillary Clinton made mistakes with classified information. He heard Hillary Clinton made this error and made the security of classified information a centerpiece of his own rhetoric and campaign because it was being used to bash Hillary Clinton over the head and it was good for him politically. Then when he made the same mistake, oh, well, It's not actually all that important anyway. It's not like, well, I'm a longtime advocate for making sure that our communications are secure, and he was like lonely and in the wilderness preaching this stuff. And then when Hillary Clinton made this mistake with her classified information, he said, see, that's what I've been talking about this whole time. It's not that he's been an evangelist for secure communications and then had his point proven by Hillary Clinton. He was leveraging the fact that Hillary Clinton had made the news this way and said, see, I am against that. I'm for secure communications. And then they won that election. Hillary Clinton kind of went away, and he was able to say, I'm also for secure communications because I'm a tough guy and an operator and a Green Beret, and it's part of my cosplay. All right, well, then why won't you do that yourself? We just caught you not doing it. Oh, well, that's stupid. It's probably worth pointing out. It's not like he's long. The length of his pontification does not predate Hillary Clinton being acknowledged as being in political trouble as a result of a poor security situation. He dove in, capitalized on the situation, took advantage of it, and did nothing to comply with his own insistence that this was important stuff. All right. But here he is complaining. What did DOJ do about it? Not a damn thing, Waltz wrote on social media in June 2023. Well into all of this. The FBI investigated Clinton's use of the private server and concluded no criminal charges were warranted. So that's what he views as not a damn thing, because no charges came out of it. FBI Director Kash Patel and Attorney General Pam Bondi have given no indication that Trump's officials' use of Signal for sensitive information will be investigated. So same outcome there. That made him so frustrated, and what an outrage it was when it didn't result in charges for Hillary Clinton. When it doesn't result in charges for Mike Waltz, that's awesome. With Bondi saying the material shared was not classified, she's denying the reality of it too, in order to get away with the hypocrisy of not charging him. While most Trump administration officials have downplayed the Signal breach publicly, some have acknowledged it was a significant mishap. Obviously, someone made a mistake. Someone made a big mistake. Secretary of State Marco Rubio told reporters during a trip last week to Jamaica. He's just pretty sure that it wasn't him, so that's why he's willing to talk about it. Rubio and his staff, who have years of experience with classified intelligence from his former role as vice chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee, are known for taking operational security seriously. Is that right? Said a senior U.S. official. He's just never been caught doing this anyway. Rubio added that his contributions to the Signal chat were minimal. Well, his contributions to everything is minimal. I don't know how I would brag about that. Just speaking for my role, I contributed to it twice, Rubio told reporters. I identified my point of contact, which is my chief of staff, and then later on I congratulated members of the team. On Sunday, Trump dismissed the controversy as politically motivated. I don't fire people because of fake news and because of witch hunts. He said, oh, yeah, right. I had put that aside, too. He resurrected the witch hunt terminology, one of his greatest hits, I guess. Hughes, the NSC spokesman, said that, quote, Mike serves at the pleasure of President Trump, and the president has voiced his support for the National Security Advisor multiple times this week. Not that he usually saves you. In the end, if he decides he needs to chuck you over, he does. While Democrats have seized on the incident as evidence of incompetence, some in the MAGA wing of the Republican Party have assailed Waltz as a George W. Bush-aligned neoconservative, because he came out of the Cheney camp, right? Circulating a video from 2016 in which he condemned Trump as a draft dodger, saying, stop Trump now. But he's just one of 500 people in the current administration who've done that. The chattering of unnamed sources should be treated with the skepticism of gossip from people lacking the integrity to attach their names, Hughes said. When asked about a senior aide's use of Gmail for highly sensitive topics, Hughes said, it is unreasonable to ask for comment on an email that you refused to provide for my review. The Post accepted the emails on the condition that they would not disclose the materials in full, so they didn't show it to Hughes. A key mark in Waltz's favor is that the breach was discovered by a left-of-center media outlet and not a conservative media outlet, officials said. That doesn't actually operate in his favor, but in Trump world, I guess it does. Well, liberals said it. Well, then we can dismiss it as not true. The one thing saving his job. Wow. is that Trump doesn't want to give Jeff Goldberg a scalp, said a second administration official. Despite all of Trump's attacks on the fake news, he still reads the papers, and he doesn't like seeing this stuff. So anytime the Russians want to needle him, I guess, they can feed this information to a liberal outlet who will reveal it, and Trump will do nothing to tamp down on the situation or back up the security situation, because if he does that, then he gives liberals a scalp. That is not the way to run a government, ladies and gentlemen. That's the best I can tell you about that one. All right. So Signal chat remains in his consciousness. He's just not doing anything about it. And I don't know. So that's our daily update. That's where we stand. I guess the pressure is still on to do something, i.e. fire Waltz. And I don't know where the pressure comes from. It might be Pete Hegseth's camp saying, I think, and probably correctly, that if we can get Waltz fired, then everyone will consider the whole thing case closed. Now, the Trump administration is out there using that terminology too. Case closed. It's case closed on Signalgate. We're not firing anyone. I don't think that even they believe that, but I think they think if they fire Waltz, they can say so. Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Got another segment to fill here, and golly, there's a lot we haven't gotten to, and I don't know, maybe that's subject for another day, but plenty of activity in federal layoff land yesterday as RFK Jr., as HHS Secretary, started firing left and right en masse. Thousands of health sector government workers laid off from National Institutes of Health, elsewhere. And really damaging cuts too, like just totally undermining our capacity for health, public health research and scientific research behind just about everything, up to and including the rollout of the vaccines that bailed us out of the worst of the pandemic, I guess. But yeah, absolutely just, what can I tell you? Devastating cuts that undermine the American position at the forefront of world scientific research. That's just one of the things that they do. And I saw, I didn't grab this, but I saw on social media, I think probably the best guess, the best explanation of all of that, besides the general overarching weird idea that Elon Musk and Dodgy has that firing everybody will somehow make a positive difference in the economic situation, which it does not, is just pandemic resentfulness. People who were upset about being told that they should be wearing masks or staying home or, going way back, closing down their businesses or keeping the kids at home and educating them remotely in order to try and prevent the spread until we could tamp down on this thing and roll out vaccines that would make it possible to at least go back to work without enormous numbers of deaths resulting. Like, why wouldn't you want that, right? But they so resented all of these controls that they need to fire anybody who had a hand in that. And in addition to that, what was really annoying about being told all of these things about how we could mitigate the spread of COVID and how we might keep the numbers of deaths down? They were using science to insist on this. And man, I hated those things that they were insisting on. So it must be science's fault, and we should get rid of anybody who knows anything about science, basically. It was just pandemic resentments manifesting in firing anybody who had anything to do with trying to keep people safe and all of this. And it's quite annoying to see it happening. All right, let's see. Other things that are of interest, I think. Something I hinted at the other day. There's a whole new round. I think Trump used the outrages that were distracting everybody from whatever else he was, wanting to sneak by. A new round of pardons. And pardons have been used in such weird and non-traditional ways, especially in this second term. Trump mostly, he pardoned some very weird people in his first term, to be sure. And he broke with tradition / wise political practice in many ways, not only in who he chose to pardon, but when he chose to pardon them. But he mostly stuck to the end of the term kind of a thing. Let's do the most controversial pardons at the end of the term when nothing, LOL, YOLO, nothing really matters anyway. You're on your way out of office. You might even be at the end of your political career. So you do the more controversial pardons that way. He did do some controversial pardons earlier in his first term than usual. And now, of course, just stood everything on its head, saying he was going to do some of the most controversial pardons when he won re-election right away, like as the fulfillment of election promises. So starting out a new term with controversial pardons is unusual, to say the least. Anyway, lots of discussion about that as they happened, but there's more information yet to come. And, of course, he's now doing pardons kind of for show, performatively, right in the middle of they don't have enough executive orders for him to sign, so he signed some additional pardons as well. And as you might imagine, they are exceptionally dumb and haven't worked out particularly well. But there's also fallout from his earlier pardons. So somewhere, where is this? There's an article that I put aside about his recent spate of pardons and how dumb and weird they are, but that one's not immediately obvious. So what I'll start with is a follow-up on one of the jackasses to whom he gave a pardon in his first term, and that they're not particularly good ones, and it's not working out in terms of helping America do well in law and order land. I don't know. I'm really winging it while I'm waiting for the article to open. Okay, so it's in the New York Times, and it's a Michael Schmidt piece. And I don't know. This is just sort of, this is where we jump off of the top news stories of the day and fill in the cracks, the other terrible things that are happening that might otherwise escape your notice. He got clemency from Trump, this wackadoodle did. We'll tell you who it is in a minute. Now he's facing charges of injuring a child. And that does not sound good. It was a tough call which information to cram into the headline on this one. But there's more. Who's the jerk we're talking about? Jonathan Brown, or I don't know whether he says Braun, but you know how Mike Brown says, Senator Mike Brown says my name, or is he governor now? Says, my name is Brown, but it's spelled Braun, B-R-A-U-N. Don't know how Jonathan does it, but Let's find out how he prefers it and then do it the other way. And you'll see why you want to do it in just a minute. Jonathan Braun Brown, who has a string of legal issues since President Trump commuted his drug sentence, by the way, 4 years ago, was arrested most recently after allegedly punching an acquaintance and shoving a 3-year-old. What a guy. He's very special. The article is illustrated by a photo of Braun and his wife, Miriam, posing with Trump, who's giving them the thumbs up at the golf resort in Florida. Trump in his golf gear with the hat pulled down low and the presidential seal golf shirt. And then these two schlubs posing with him. So, a personal thumbs up for these guys. This is a photo. The caption says it's from April of 2022. Jonathan Braun and his wife Miriam visited a Trump resort in Florida. Mr. Braun said that he has had never met the president to discuss his commutation. Anyway, and the photo is actually from a chance 3-minute encounter during a Passover event, which is also of interest. And it may very well be that, look, let me say this. Doing your Passover Seder at a Trump resort in Florida seems like a weird thing to do. This is normally something, done at home. But sometimes you have a big event and, or a community Seder happens. You need a larger venue, whatever. Doing it at a Trump venue, if you're a rich person living in proximity to the Trump venues in Florida, it might be something you would do, but, it's supposed to be, this is an act of worship. You don't really want to do it at a Trump facility, paying top dollar for it, whatever. But it could be done. However, and I recognize this is Florida and the weather is warm in April of 2022, I guess, but if you are having a chance encounter during a Passover event. One, why the Passover event out on the fairway of the golf course? Like, again, this is typically speaking an indoor event. Two, and like I said, it's warm, but Jonathan Braun is in white shorts, a pair of sneakers, no socks, and a black polo shirt, which is fine for your casual knockabout, whatever you're doing during the day, but maybe in Florida it passes for Seder wear, Passover event wear. Miriam is in purple yoga pants and a matching exercise top, midriff bearing outfit here, along with a water bottle, also in exercise shoes, and it just appears to me like they're not at a Passover event, is what I'm saying. Okay, well, at any rate, that's the least of the offenses involved. Let's get to the real nitty-gritty of what a jackass he is and how he's conducting himself in public. Jonathan Braun has repeatedly been in legal trouble since President Trump commuted his federal prison sentence more than 4 years ago as part of a rushed last-minute process of granting clemency to allies and well-connected special pleaders before leaving office. So this was among the flurry of the most controversial things for which he never really wanted to face scrutiny. On Saturday, like most recently, this Saturday, Mr. Braun, a major player in the predatory lending business, was arrested on Long Island on charges of assaulting an acquaintance and his 3-year-old child, according to court documents. It was the 4th time that he has been arrested since Mr. Trump freed him, since he got his clemency at the end of the last Trump administration. Thanks for rewarding our faith in you. 4 arrests in the 4 years since you got pardoned. Mr. Braun punched the man in the face in this latest incident and then shoved the child to the ground, causing a red mark on his back and substantial pain to the child's back, the document said. Now, sometimes they inflate the nature of the injuries or whatever, but it's hard to overreact to shoving a 3-year-old child to the ground. But it may have been, in an effort to punch the guy in the face again, I bumped into the child and knocked him. Anyway, the point is none of this should have been happening. Mr. Braun was charged with assault, endangering the welfare of a child, and injuring a child under the age of 7. I didn't realize that was a separate charge. He was released on bail on Monday. Robert Caliendo, a lawyer for Mr. Braun, did not respond to messages seeking comment. In his final hours in office in early of 2021, Trump commuted Braun Brown's 10-year sentence. Why was he in jail for 10 years? Running a marijuana smuggling ring, throwing bales of drugs over the wall, possibly injuring people at our southern borders. That's exactly who you don't want to be freeing from jail, right? Unless you don't give a flying about anything, like in the last minutes of your term. Anyway, how did this happen? Why? Who gives a flying whatever about Jonathan Brown? Well, Braun's family used a connection to Charles Kushner himself, by the way, of course, the recipient of a pardon. How did that happen? Charles Kushner is Jared Kushner's dad, Trump's son-in-law, of course, Jared Kushner, who served as a senior White House advisor. And they used that connection to try to get the matter before Mr. Trump in the last minutes of his term in office. Jared Kushner's White House office drafted the language used to announce commutations for Mr. Braun and others. Again, normally the work of the U.S. pardons attorney who screens and says, let's make sure that these pardons aren't going to be personally embarrassing to the president. Less of an issue on the way out the door. And very often, I think probably presidents do instruct the pardon attorney. I understand that this one will be embarrassing, but I want to do this one anyway, now that I'm on my way out from my last, in the last minutes of my term. But here they didn't even bother with that person. Jared Kushner drafted the thing. Since then, because Jared did such a good job choosing this guy for his pardon, Braun returned to predatory lending, only to be banned from operating in that business by a New York state judge and a federal judge for engaging in deceptive practices. That was his main business before. I guess he was smuggling drugs on the side, went to prison for that. And as soon as he was freed from prison, he said, well, he didn't start saying, I'm going to start smuggling drugs again, but he did say, I'm going back to predatory lending, which prompted 2 judges, a state judge and a federal judge, to say, no, you're not. And he has been accused of a number of crimes, including punching his wife. I guess the woman in purple here, supposedly at a Passover event in April of 2022, posing with Trump. I guess, I don't know whether he immediately punched her afterwards. Why are you dressing like this for a Seder? Or whether it had some other reason. Punching his wife and punching his father-in-law in the head. Grabbing a nanny's breast while touching himself, which is probably happened later at a different point in time. Trying to assault a female nurse with poles used to hold intravenous bags. Unusual specificity. And threatening a synagogue congregant because he was, he's a pious man, who asked him to be quiet during the services. Isn't that something? So blabbing, I don't know, doing what during services. I guess that explains how he shows up in shorts for the Seder, I suppose. But if he also won't shut up during services and somebody says, can you please be quiet? I don't know how they put it to him. Who knows? The synagogue could be full of jackasses. Shut the F up or I'll have you killed. Or something like that. I don't know. But he answers to whether it was a polite request or not. He answers with the thing you're not supposed to do. Do you know who I am or what I can do to you? Mr. Braun told the congregant, according to an affidavit that the man signed. Mr. Braun's conduct has focused attention on how Mr. Trump has used his clemency powers in both his first and second terms to benefit people whose cases have often come to him apparently with little vetting. We'll put it that way. At least 7 recipients of clemency from Mr. Trump during his first term have been charged with new crimes since then. And that doesn't even count the number of people who got clemency in his second term who have been charged with new crimes since then. In his second term, Trump has dismissed the U.S. pardon attorney entirely, in the Justice Department and consolidated review of pardon applications in the White House, setting off a scramble from lawyers and lobbyists with connections to the administration to get the clemency applications of clients in front of Mr. Trump and his aides. So let's take the lawyers who know what they're doing out of this process entirely. Mr. Braun's repeated arrests also raise questions about the claims by Mr. Trump and his allies that he and his top political appointees in the Justice Department are uniquely positioned to stop violent crime and that his administration will stop at nothing to crack down on it instead of just creating more opportunities for it. But since taking office, it's become increasingly clear that there are certain types of violent crime that Trump and his administration are more focused on, i.e., in particular, violence committed by immigrants, people in the country illegally, or maybe not, and those who have destroyed Tesla cars, dealerships, and charging stations. That's where the priority lies. While Mr. Trump has purged the upper ranks of the Justice Department and FBI of people that he sees as opponents or members of a, quote, deep state working against his agenda, he has used his clemency powers even more freely than he did in his first term. He's not only eschewed the Justice Department process for reviewing clemency applications, but has given out pardons and commutations to supporters who stormed the Capitol and assaulted police officers defending the building. His administration has also moved to restore gun rights to felons. Oh, yeah, right. That, too, I put aside, and we didn't get to it. And wasn't it, is it Mel Gibson, I think, who was like personally petitioning to get his gun rights back, and Trump intervened to make sure that he could get, was it that, or do I remember it wrong? Let's see if I can dig that up while I'm looking through Pocket. Anyway, in response to questions about Mr. Braun's case and the administration's commitment to dealing with violent criminals, a spokesperson for the White House attacked the New York Times, because why not, but did not address Mr. Braun's conduct or what it says about the president's commitment to fighting violent crime, which was the actual question, right? So not going to answer that, but we are going to attack the New York Times. Although Trump commuted his sentence, Mr. Braun is still on supervised release, a federal form of parole, which is weird because he keeps going around punching people and threatening them. Judge Kiyo A. Matsumoto of federal court in Brooklyn originally sentenced him to 10 years in prison in 2019 while Trump was president for his role as a major marijuana dealer and is overseeing his supervised release. I wouldn't be surprised if somebody, an enterprising reporter could probably find this. The press release from the Department of Justice in 2019 probably bragging on putting a major drug dealer behind bars. How interesting that he was later released by the president. But despite the 4 arrests, Judge Matsumoto has not sent him back behind bars. Another judge sort of hesitant to do the right thing. Reasons unknown. Could have something to do with worries about threats. That would be par for the course. Could have something to do with, I don't know, some legal technicality or judicial forbearance or deference to the government. A clerk for Judge Matsumoto declined to comment and directed questions to the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Eastern District of New York, which declined to comment as well. Braun has a long history of violence dating to when he was a drug dealer, as is often the case, and worked as a predatory lender to small businesses. So a drug dealer and a predatory lender, like when we say predatory lender, are we talking about a check cashing place or are we talking about a loan shark? I don't know. I sell drugs and I'm a predatory lender and I threaten people with bodily harm if they get in my way. That actually sounds like a mobster more than anything else. For instance, let's see. He beat an underling with a belt and used threats of violence against debtors, like I'll break your legs, which is sort of classic, right? According to court documents, including a rabbi whom he told, "I am going to make you bleed." During Mr. Braun's time behind bars in 2020, federal investigators began discussions with him about a deal in which he would be released from prison in exchange for agreeing to help the U.S. Attorney's Office in Manhattan bring prosecutions against others in the merchant cash advance business who were intimidating small businesses across the country. It's a legitimate business. Say, merchant cash advance, we call it. Wow. As part of a potential deal, Mr. Braun was going to have to give up working in the merchant cash advance business. Seems like part of a good deal. But at the same time, Braun headed down a far different path, right? Here's prosecutors are saying, listen, we can spring you from prison and give you a deal if you give us bigger fish, the normal roll-up sort of move. But at the same time, he realizes, why should I make any kind of a deal where I have to give anything up? I could just ask Trump to pardon me entirely, and then I don't have to do any work for the prosecutors. Wow, what a good idea. His lawyer, though, thought the idea was a wild long shot, given his violent history. Right. And normally they say, well, presidential pardons are usually few and far between. The fact that you're beating everybody up left and right and are a federally convicted drug dealer, probably not going to get the pardon. You're probably better off with this deal that the prosecutors are offering you. But they didn't understand Trump yet. That commutation came through anyway. You'll never guess the date. I mean, if I give you 3 guesses and say, what's the most outrageous date on which this pardon could be issued? You'd probably answer January 20th, 2021. Yep, that's the final day of Trump's first term. The pardon dealt a devastating blow to the federal investigation into the merchant cash advance business, whatever that really is, as prosecutors lost all their leverage over Mr. Braun. The commutation alarmed law enforcement officials and legal experts who questioned why Trump was bestowing clemency on someone who had such a documented history of violence. And that's because he was looking for some violence on his behalf, I guess. Shortly after regaining his freedom, Mr. Braun returned to working in the merchant cash advance business, if it is a business, and he had repeated run-ins with law enforcement. In August, he was arrested after being accused of punching his 75-year-old father-in-law and his wife in the head, according to police. Braun struck the father-in-law as he tried to protect his daughter from Mr. Braun. Protecting daughters. It's a big deal among Republicans. He was, of course, chasing after her while the couple had an argument in their home, the police said. At the time, Braun's wife said that twice over the previous 5 weeks, Braun had assaulted her, including throwing her off a bed and onto the floor, causing her substantial pain and bruising her legs. I don't remember when. So this is, I guess, August of 2021. By April of 2022, though, they're happily posing with him at the golf course. He was also charged then with driving his white Lamborghini and black Ferrari, both without license plates, and failing to pay $160 in tolls. In late February, Braun was arrested and then charged after a nanny who worked in his home accused him of coming into her room and touching her breasts while he touched himself. It's a two-handed operation. Then on March 26th, he was arrested, accused of menacing a nurse who was treating him with intravenous bags. A nurse who was treating him with the intravenous bag pole and also threatening the congregants. So February and March, a very busy period for him in terms of racking up more assault charges. The article ends there. It's just a weird situation, to say the least. But it's matched, once again, with more abuse of the pardon's power right now. And here we've got from Will Bunch at the Philly Inquirer a piece titled, "Trump's Insane Pardons Are Killing Any Faint Flicker of Justice in America," like as a whole. Let me give you a flavor of it while we get set to exit for the day. So painting the picture, this is moving us out toward the west. The Oglala Sioux and the historic Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota, where many tribal members still live, have often witnessed the American government on its worst behavior. Pine Ridge is the home to Wounded Knee, where in 1890 U.S. Army troops, fueled by settlers' racist fears of a Sioux resurgence, massacred roughly 300 of the Lakota, and where in 1973 the modern-day American Indian movement faced its own blood-soaked climax. It probably won't shock you to learn that President Donald Trump has not been a friend to the Oglala Sioux or the other indigenous Americans living in the Dakotas. One of the first acts of his term in 2017 was to ram through approval for the Dakota Access Pipeline, despite months of contentious protests by Native American residents that the government had no right to risk polluting its hallowed lands. Now, Trump's latest act is adding insult to centuries of injury for the Sioux. The story of this newest outrage starts in 2015 when a group of slick investors arrived at Pine Ridge to pitch leaders of the Oglala Nation on an economic development plan for what stubbornly remains one of the poorest counties in the United States. The backers of the planned a bond sale to benefit the reservation. Well, who were the backers? One was Devin Archer, remember the name? Who at the time was also partners on another deal with Hunter Biden. You know who that is, of course. The beleaguered Oglala Sioux never reaped a dime from what federal prosecutors soon charged was a swindle from the start. A 2016 indictment alleged that the group defrauded its investors as some partners used the proceeds for fancy cars and jewelry, while Archer was accused of using some of the cash for propping up his other ventures. His 2018 conviction on securities fraud charges led to a 1-year prison sentence and an order to pay $43 million in restitution, triggering a 7-year legal battle to avoid those penalties and some major changes for Archer. And we'll get a couple of these on the record before exiting for the day when, according to reporting by the New York Times, the Biden family ignored pleas for a pardon and froze Archer out upon Joe Biden's ascension to the White House in 2021. He instead became a whistleblower, or an alleged whistleblower anyway, against Hunter Biden. He eagerly worked with Trump allies, Republicans on Capitol Hill, and right-wing journalists by offering dirt on Hunter. The now 47th president was clearly impressed by Archer's flip-flop. On Tuesday, Trump signed a full and unconditional pardon for Archer, bypassing the once traditional Justice Department review process that judges such quaint notions as contrition or good works. Neither the Oglala Sioux or its duped investors will see any justice in the case, said Archer. I'm full MAGA now. They're more my people. The case for presidential mercy for an alleged swindler turned political ally may not even have been the worst travesty of an injustice in a week when Trump, while the Beltway media almost solely focused on a different scandal around the accidental leak of Yemen attack plans, went off on a little-noticed pardon spree for his friends and a big-time donor. Well, it wasn't just him. There were many more included in the latest round of stupid pardons. But amazingly, or perhaps not amazingly, also Devin Archer included in that one. Maybe we can squeeze in some reporting about the rest of the people pardoned later on in the week. Time now, though, to hand things over to Justice.
NetworksRadio.com.
At least we'll get some justice in all of this.
Listening to Kagro in the morning with David Waldman.
All right, I wanted to get the start of that story on the record anyway, but now time to hand things over to Justice for his roundup of stories, including Trump's psychotic behavior explodes as his arbitrary and self-imposed tariff deadline hits. We'll hear more about that, I guess, by this evening. And if we have an economy, we'll be back tomorrow.